Hello, you guys. So today we will be continuing the analysis with Jane Eyre. So we will be analyzing chapter 31 till chapter 38. And then the story will end. In the end, I will do another character analysis with you guys. So, chapter 31. So teaching wasn't easy and Jane had thought it would be. Some students wanted to learn but others misbehaved. One day, Sanjin visits and he tells Jane that he has decided on becoming a missionary. So now Sanjin has picked his career path. Then Rosamond interrupts the conversation. She was a very charming lady. Jane noticed the chemistry between her and Sanjin and she instantly knew that they liked each other. So basically, a new character is introduced, which is Rosamond, and she and Sanjin have chemistry, and till now we know that they might have a romantic relationship or just have developed romantic feelings for each other. Let's go to chapter 32. Time passes and many aspects of Jane's life changed. She begins to have a connection with her students and she progresses within her career as a mistress. See, this is how Jane's always dedicated and determined to whatever she does. Like, she's this character who doesn't, always put this mediocre job. She always puts her best into everything and always works her hardest. Jane was a popular person and everyone talked to her. So now we're seeing that Jane, she was being known to people, her social abilities were increasing. One night she has a dream about Mr. Rochester which gives her hope that they will meet again. So no matter what happens with Mr. Rochester, no matter what he does, Jane's always gonna have this special place in her heart for him and she's always gonna love him. And despite leaving, Jane left because she's a righteous person. She knows what's right and she knew that leaving was the right decision. But despite everything that happened, she loves Mr. Rochester and nothing's gonna change that. Rosamond passes by and sees Jane's marvelous drawings, so she asks Jane to draw one for her. Jane, being the kind person she is, she agrees, and Rosamond wants Jane to visit her father. When Jane meets Rosamond's father, she finds out that he thinks greatly of Sanjin, so even Rosamond's father is familiar of Sanjin. When Sanjin visits Jane, he admits that he has feelings for Rosamond, yet he does not think she will make a good wife. So now we spotted the problem or the issue is that there's an issue. So they do have these romantic feelings for each other. They do love each other, like maybe not love each other, but have feelings for each other. But Sanjin does not think she's gonna make a good wife. And now we learned something about Sanjin is that he thinks more with his head than his heart. Then he looks at the drawing Jane drew for Rosamond. He rips the corner of the drawing and then he runs. And then we're gonna see why he ran. So chapter 33. When Sanjin comes back, he reveals a life-changing fact to Jane. He tells her the story about an orphan named Jane Eyre, so that's Jane, and asks her if it is her. Since Jane had hidden her identity, so Jane hid her identity, she told them her name was Miss Elliot, and when they found out her name wasn't Miss Elliot because she didn't respond to when Mr. Sanjin called her Miss Elliot and Jane didn't respond, but she never told them her name was Jane Eyre. That's the thing. Turns out, Jane is the relative that Sanjin's uncle gave the money to. So Sanjin's uncle died, and he left nothing to Sanjin, Diana, or Mary. And he left it to someone else, and that someone else is Jane. That meant that Jane, Diana, and Mary were related, and Jane was wealthy. So turns out that Diana, Mary, and Sanjin are Jane's cousin, her paternal cousins from her paternal side. Jane said that she would never leave her job until Sanjin finds a replacement. So Jane was working as a mistress, and now that she's rich, she doesn't need a job to support herself, but she will still be working as a mistress because she's a committed person and a determined person and a dedicated person. So she will stay and fulfill her responsibilities until Sanjin finds someone other than her that can be a mistress. Jane asked about Mr. Rochester, but nothing about him was said. Jane was extremely delighted that she had cousins she could be proud of. So all this time, throughout all her life, Jane has never gotten along with the Reeds, and at Lowood she didn't have family. No one at Lowood did because it was a charity school for orphans. But after all of this, Jane finally had these cousins she could be proud of, and she's planned on splitting her uncle's fortune with them. So you can see that Jane's also generous. So we can also say that Jane's generous because she split her uncle's fortune with them. And now we found out that we have the theme of family that we will be sharing later throughout the novel. Chapter 34. Jane closes the school for Christmas since it's holiday. Jane, Diana, and Mary were all joyful, but Sanjin was very quiet and disengaged. He was cold and did not talk to Jane as much as he did a few weeks ago, so he was becoming more and more distant. On the table, Diana asks Sanjin if he is sure about becoming a missionary and makes it clear that he will not change his mind. So Diana, she was asking her brother, like, are you sure you want to be a missionary? It's kind of a risk, it's dangerous, it's not an easy job. But Sanjin makes it clear that he won't change his mind. Mary asks about Rosamond because they both know, Rosamond and Sanjin have, these feelings for each other. And he says that she is getting married to a wealthy man named Mr. Granby. Time goes on and Sanjin begins to have power over Jane, so he's influencing Jane. He asks her to learn Hindustani instead of German. So previously, Diana and Mary were helping Jane with her German, but then suddenly Sanjin begins asking Jane to learn Hindustani, and he has a reason for that. So he can have someone to keep up with him. So he's learning Hindustani because he wants to go to India to become a missionary. One day, on a walk, Sanjin asks Jane to marry him. Jane was surprised. He told her that he believes she will make a good wife. So again, he does not have any romantic feelings for Jane, but as I said previously, he always thinks with his head. He does not think with his heart. He uses his, logic instead of feelings. So he made her study Hindustani for 10 months because he wanted her to go to India with him. Jane said that she would accompany him to India as a sister, but Sanjin does not want, and he insists she goes to India with him as a wife. So let's change something here. But Jane refuses since they are not in love. After that, John became colder than ever to Jane. So this is actually very important, and let us add the Sanjin. Okay, so basically, now we know all the reasons behind Sanjin's behavior and why he's acting the way he is. He wanted to marry Jane because he saw Jane as this determined and responsible person, and he thought it is fit for a missionary's wife. And he wanted to marry Jane, but Jane didn't want to because Jane always believed in love. She wanted to marry someone she loved. She wanted to marry a piece of her. She wanted to marry an equal to her. But Sanjin wanted to marry someone who would just be fit as a missionary's wife. And Jane didn't want that. So when Jane didn't do what Sanjin wanted, he became colder than ever. So he's probably he's punishing her with his behavior in a way. And all of this has been planned since the beginning because he made her learn Hindustani for 10 months. So this has been planned. Let us go to chapter 35. So during this chapter, Sanjin punishes Jane since she declined his proposal. As I said, she tries to befriend him, because she feels bad, but he ignores her. Later, Jane tells Diana about the proposal and she warns her not to go to Calcutta with him. So Calcutta is an area in India, it's a city. And Jane was telling her cousin Diana, and Jane and Diana were very close. So she was telling Diana about the proposal, and Diana tells her, don't go whatsoever, just don't go. And it was evident means clear, that Sanjin did not love Jane. And marriage is about love, but to Sanjin, it wasn't about love, it was more about responsibility. At dinner time, Sanjin prays and makes Jane feel like it is her duty to be with him. So Sanjin was trying to use religion as a way to make Jane be with him. So then they go outside and Jane was accepting his proposal. But then Jane felt a shock in her body and heard Mr. Rochester's voice. So she took this as a sign. That's when she realized that she was independent and Sanjin was no longer having this power over, this deep influence over her that he always had. Chapter 36. Sanjin gave Jane a letter trying to convince her to stay, so he put it under her door. But Jane knew deep in her heart that she had to leave. She tells Diana that she is going to see a friend, so she lies. Jane goes to Thornfield and finds out Thornfield Hall was burned down during autumn. After Jane's departure, Mr. Rochester isolated himself and sent Adele to school and Mrs. Fairfax to friends. So Thornfield was gone and everyone was somewhere. It wasn't all in the same house anymore. Or manor, if you want to call it. A fire happened which resulted in him losing his hand and eyesight. So basically, losing his hand and his eyesight is kind of like a way of punishment because Rochester, he did commit many sins in his life, throughout his life. So losing his hand and sight were kind of a punishment. Bertha died after she jumped off the roof. Mr. Rochester tried stopping her, but she still jumped. Jane demanded to see Mr. Rochester and would pay double for the ride. So basically, Jane wanted to see Mr. Rochester no matter what, and she was willing to pay double for the ride to see Mr. Rochester. And this is what happened to Thornfield. So basically, Bertha died because she jumped off the roof. Mr. Rochester tried stopping her, but she still jumped. That showed, a kind of peace, because Bertha was the, thing between Jane and Rochester's marriage. They couldn't get married because of Bertha, but now Bertha's gone. And Rochester, I don't know, I did not say this, but when Thornfield was burning down, there was this fire, Rochester made sure all the staff left before him. He's a caring person. He made sure everyone was safe and everyone left before he left. And then the staircase fell down and he lost his hands and eyesight. Chapter 37. 1 second. Once Jane arrived, she saw Mr. Rochester. So now this is at Ferndon. She saw Mr. Rochester. His body looked the same, but his face did not. He goes to take a shower, and when he comes back, he has dinner with Jane. At first, he thought that he was dreaming, and it wasn't really Jane, but she assured him that she was there. He expresses how much he misses her and loves her. He missed her, they love each other. The next morning, they take a walk, and Jane tells him about her fortune, her cousins, and St. John. Mr. Rochester thought she loved St. John, but Jane guarantees him that she does not. Mr. Rochester was the one she wanted, even with his blindness and his hand. Then Mr. Rochester proposes. Turns out the night Jane felt a shock in her body, Mr. Rochester asked God to take him to a life where he may be with Jane. So see, this is kind of, a magical element, maybe we can call it. Then he heard Jane's reply, "I'm coming, wait for me." Then that was when Jane ran away from St. John, and that chose fate. So basically, you remember when St. John was proposing to Jane and Jane was about to accept it, then she felt that shock in her body and she heard Mr. Rochester's voice. At that same time, Mr. Rochester was asking God to be in a life where Jane was with him. And God accepted that wish, and that chose the fate, and that shows that Rochester and Jane belong together. Chapter 38. Jane and Mr. Rochester got married and lived happily. He got his eyesight back 2 years after their marriage, and he went to see his son. So turns out Jane and Rochester had a son. Adele was at school, and Jane visited her and found out that the school was too harsh. So Jane put her in a better school with the better regulations. So Jane couldn't be Adele's governess because she was busy and she had a son, but she did of course care for Adele, and they always had that bond. So Adele wasn't in a good school, so Jane put her in a better school where they had better regulations. Both Diana and Mary got married. They both loved their husbands and were loved by them. St. John was not married, but he got better. He wasn't this cold man with that super cold heart. Let us go to the character analysis. So Jane Eyre, she's honest, impulsive, kind, and talkative. Jane talks a lot. And changes, she's married and she's a mother and now she's wealthy. So the wealth part is, her social class. The marriage is her, love life, and the mother is also her family life. Relationships. So she has a good relationship with Adele. Adele is her stepdaughter. Blanche, they had a bad relationship. They were foil characters. They were different. And Blanche's, let's say cruelness brought out the good in Jane. Diana, they had a great relationship. They were very close. They're cousins. Mary also, they had a good relationship. They were cousins. Mrs. Fairfax, they had the better relationship, but then when Jane and Rochester's relationship happened, Mrs. Fairfax wasn't very fond of it. Mr. Rochester, he's her husband. He's her soulmate. They're in love. St. John, he was good, but he changed. After Jane rejected his proposal, he changed towards her. Character of Jane, she is the main character of the whole novel. We follow her throughout the whole novel, and she's the protagonist. And she is, the full character of Jane is Blanche Ingram. Edward Rochester, which is Mr. Rochester, and Edward is Mr. Rochester's first name. So Mr. Rochester is guilty for committing many sins. He has a great kindness towards Jane and also towards the staff when he let them exit before he did. He's very moody. Sometimes he's cold to Jane, but sometimes he starts biting his lip and, doing stuff. And he's very mysterious. And he's also sardonic and he's witty. He always has that wit. His relationship, so Adele is his warden. It means she's not his daughter, but he does take care of her. Blanche is his ex-wife, his ex-fiancée, and they had a bad relationship. Bertha is his ex-wife, and they had a horrible relationship. They could not stand each other. Celine Verns is his fling. Jane is his wife, and they're in love, and he has a good relationship with Mrs. Fairfax. She is his housekeeper. Mr. Rochester is the main character and he's the Byronic hero. So basically the Byronic hero is when he's like the romantic interest of the protagonist. And he's the full character of Edward Rochester is St. John because they're completely different. Miss Edward Rochester did many things that are against religion, and he's very passionate. Edward Rochester is very passionate, and St. John is more about responsibility and the things we should do. Adele, she's nice, she's not very smart, but she's spoiled. And Mrs. Fairfax is helpful, professional, and welcoming. The way she welcomed Jane to Thornfield was very kind. Blanche, she's charming, she's beautiful. It was said multiple times on the book. She's a gold digger because when Rochester was he pretended to be the gypsy. He had told her that he did not have much money, and she did not like that. And she's very spiteful towards Jane and Adele. She was very mean. Bertha, she's not okay. She's mentally ill, so she's insane. Diana, she's intellectual because she has a lot to do with Spanish and she knows a lot. She's very sweet towards Jane and she's very sympathetic. When Jane, she came back, she was like tired, and when she came, she was homeless and she slept at their house. Diana really cared about her and wanted to help her. Mary was intelligent and she was gracious, and Mary was intelligent because she knew a lot of things, and she was kind, she was gracious. Sanjin is ambitious, he always has this goal to be a missionary. He is cold and he's distant, he's intimidating. He was very intimidating to Jane and he had great influence on her. And he was very religious, and he kind of used that religion in a bad way. He didn't use it in a good way. Genre, so it's the gothic atmosphere of Thornfield. It's romance because the romantic relationship of Jane and Rochester, and it's buildings romance. Themes, so coming of age, we see Jane grow up, many phases of her life change, aspects of her life change. She learns many lessons. Family, her family with Rochester, the family she built with Rochester, the abusive family she had with the Reeds, family with the Rivers, the family that she met later on, and also Mrs. Temple's, kind of motherly attitude towards Jane, gender roles with her and Mr. Rochester, independence, when she left Mr. Rochester and showed that she was an independent, strong woman. Social class, she faced a lot of social class discrimination as an orphan, as a person without parents, and religion. So we will be talking about how each character's ending was. So Mrs. Jane, she was married with a son to Mr. Rochester. Mrs. Reed, she passed away after suffering a stroke. John Reed, he took his own life. Eliza joined the convent. Georgiana married a wealthy man. Bessie married with 2 children. She married the coach. Helen Burns died after contracting consumption. Miss Temple gets married and leaves Lowood. Mr. Brocklehurst, he leaves Lowood after his corruption was caught. Mrs. Fairfax no longer works for Mr. Rochester and went to France. Mr. Rochester, he married Jane with a son, lost his hand, and gained a bit of his eyesight. So later he gains a bit, not all of it, but he does gain some of it. Bertha Mason jumped off the roof and died. Adele changed schools and is Jane's stepdaughter now. Diana Rivers got married. Mary Rivers got married, and Sanjin went to India to become a missionary. This is it, guys. This is the whole story. So we analyzed all the chapters and we talked about all the characters' endings and the themes and all the characters, relationships and changes. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about the book, please comment down below. And if you want to see, the previous chapters, then watch the previous chapters and you can understand more about the novel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please like and subscribe if you want, if these videos were beneficial for you. Thank you guys so much. Bye bye.